All right, let's just dive right in. We all think about commitment, right? Whether it's to a person, a career, a cause. But how often do we actually stop and really calculate the true cost? Today, we're going to dig into a really challenging teaching that pretty much forces us to do exactly that, asking what we are genuinely willing to pay for the things we claim to believe in. So, we have to start with this quote from the Gospel of Luke because, let's be totally honest, that is a jarring thing to read. The word hate just jumps right off the page, especially when you're talking about family. It's absolutely designed to stop you in your tracks and make you think, wait, what could that possibly mean? Okay, so right off the bat, it is absolutely critical to understand this is not a literal command to feel hatred. The sources are really clear on this. What we're seeing here is a powerful rhetorical tool called hyperbole. It's a deliberate, over the top exaggeration that's used to make a point that could not be more important. You see, using language that's shocking is meant to just cut through all the noise in our lives. It forces us to ask a really fundamental question about our priorities, our allegiances, and our loves. It's a pretty radical way of asking, when everything is on the line, what or who truly, really comes first for you? And that whole idea of actually thinking things through, well, that leads us straight into our first section, calculating the real cost. Because as we're about to see, a life of deep, meaningful commitment isn't built on just vague feelings or some passing inspiration. Here's a really fascinating insight. Love, whether it's for a person or a path in life, often kicks off with these really intense emotions, but it only matures, it only gets real through actual effort. It requires our whole being, our intellect to think it through, our creativity to figure out how to get past challenges, and our will to just keep going when those initial warm and fuzzy feelings start to fade. And to make this idea of rational, thought-out commitment really concrete, Jesus tells a couple of short stories. So let's take a look at the first one, which is all about a person who decides they want to build a tower. The builder's logic here is just, well, it's common sense, right? You don't just grab a shovel and start digging. You have the vision, sure, but then, and this is the absolute key, you sit down to calculate the cost. It's only when you know you can actually finish the job that you commit. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure and, ridicule. The second example he gives raises the stakes even higher. Now we're talking about a king who's preparing his country for war. He has to make a cold, hard calculation. Can my army of 10,000 soldiers actually defeat an opposing army of 20,000? And if the answer is no, then the rational move is to try and make peace. See? Both stories are hammering home the exact same message. Look before you leap. So, how does this actually apply when the stakes get personal? This is where that calculation becomes incredibly difficult. I mean, what happens when the cost of your commitment involves a choice not between something good and something bad, but between two things that both seem really good? This brings up such a powerful insight. The most agonizing decisions we make in life are almost never about choosing good over evil. I mean, that's usually pretty straightforward. The really tough calls, the ones that keep us up at night, are when two of our values, two of our loves are in direct conflict with each other. Just think about the story of the Exodus for a second. Imagine you're a young person there. On one hand, you're called to honor your parents, and they want to stay in the safety of the known world, even if it's not great. On the other hand, you feel this powerful call from God, through Moses, to leave everything for a risky, totally uncertain future. It's a direct conflict between two goods. Do you honor your family, or do you follow your faith? And let's be real, this isn't just some ancient dilemma. We face these kinds of choices all the time. Maybe your parents have invested everything in your future as an engineer, but your heart is screaming at you to pursue art. Or maybe you make a spiritual choice that your family just doesn't understand and it creates all this tension. Or you have to choose between that secure, high-paying job and a life of service that, frankly, pays very little. It's the same fundamental conflict. So how in the world do we navigate these collisions? Well, this brings us to a really crucial distinction between two very different ways of approaching life and faith. One that's based on fleeting feelings, and one that's based on deep, solid commitment. I just love the language the homily uses here. It says that challenging teachings, the hard stuff, are what separate the religious tourists from the missionary disciples. Think about it. A tourist is just passing through, right? They're looking for the good experiences, the photo ops. But a disciple's on the mission. They're committed to the entire journey, the good and the bad. Now, there's a popular mindset out there that can really prevent this deeper kind of commitment. It's often called prosperity theology, and it's basically the idea that strong faith is a tool you use to get what you want, divine favor that leads directly to material wealth, good health, and an easy, successful life. And this creates such a stark contrast. A gospel of success is focused on me, what can I gain, how can I get ahead? But the path of discipleship, that's focused on God and others. What can I give? One view sees suffering as something to be avoided at all costs, while the other accepts that sacrifice is just part of a meaningful journey. So at the end of the day, it means that true commitment to any cause isn't about what's convenient. It's about having strong conviction. A feel-good philosophy is just totally unprepared for the tests that life is inevitably going to throw its way. You know, authentic commitment isn't some kind of magic. It actually requires tools. This means things like developing discipline that goes beyond just our emotions, actually using our reason and our intelligence in our spiritual life, and maybe even creating a program of life, like a concrete plan to build better habits. It's all about being intentional. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like a lot of work, a lot of cost. So what's the ultimate payoff? What's the return on this really difficult investment? And that brings us to our final section. First, we need to clear up a really common misunderstanding. When we hear the phrase carrying the cross, we often think it just means putting up with the random struggles of life. You know, getting sick, having a bad day at work. But the sources suggest it's actually something far more specific and active. What it really means is to voluntarily and knowingly accept a hardship, whether it's risk or ridicule or some other sacrifice, as a direct result of your commitment to your path. See the difference? It's not something that just happens to you. It's a difficulty you accept for your convictions. And this brings us right back around, full circle, to the non-negotiable nature of this whole teaching. This isn't presented as some optional extra for the super committed. No, it's framed as an essential, core part of the journey. But here's the beautiful paradox at the very heart of it all. By relinquishing our tight-fisted control, by letting go of our attachments to comfort, to possessions, to our own carefully laid plans, we don't end up with less. The promise is that we actually find more. A deeper joy, a greater purpose, and a profound sense of inner freedom. So as we wrap all this up, the teaching really boils down to this one very personal question. After you've calculated the cost, after you've really considered the sacrifices, it's asking you to look at your own life and decide what, for you, is truly worth the price.